Professors panic as woke courses get canceled by state law. Florida International's Board of Trustees voted to drop 22 courses from its core curriculum. These are general education classes that all students were required to take. These courses included focusing on race, gender, and LGBT studies following the passage of SB 266 in Florida, which restricts the content of general education courses at public universities. How can you have a public university with general education courses that students are required to take to get their degrees that have political nonsense in them? It's one thing to offer these political nonsense courses at all, but to offer them as general education classes, forcing students to go through with this and adding the state's credibility to these kinds of courses, completely inappropriate. Faculty members at the university and the American Association of University Professors expressed concern that administrators are overstepping in areas traditionally controlled by faculty, such as curriculum decisions. And of course, there's no problem with the teachers and faculty deciding on their own what kind of classes they want to teach. That's terrific. That's fantastic. That's what we want them to do when we can trust them, not when we can't trust them anymore. These political troublemakers put the state in a position that the government actually had to step in to restrict them. The decision reflects a statewide shift where public institutions in Florida are removing courses on topics like race and identity politics in compliance with SB 266, which bans curriculum that distorts significant historical events or is based on theories of systemic oppression. Professors worry, though, that cutting courses related to race, gender, and LGBT issues will disadvantage students, especially in a majority-minority institution like FIU, where many students come from working-class families and could benefit from understanding systemic issues. Except these are not really systemic issues. This is a political ideology that does not reflect reality. Faculty also fear that the removal of these courses will lead to a decrease in enrollment in related majors, which could impact department funding and the existence of interdisciplinary programs like sociology, anthropology, and gender studies. That's right, less money for these kinds of programs, even on an elective basis. From InsideHigherEd.com, a battle over Florida's general education courses. Florida International University faculty have raised concerns about course revisions designed to comply with state law, a process undertaken quietly across the state. General education courses are required classes that provide students with a broad range of knowledge and skills for personal and professional development. General education courses are supposed to help students think critically, communicate effectively, understand diverse perspectives, and prepare for challenges in life and work. There is no place for their political agenda to be jammed into general education courses. Florida International University's Board of Trustees voted last week to drop 22 courses from the core curriculum, including Anthropology of Race and Ethnicity, Introduction to LGBT Studies, and Sociology of Gender. So not everyone's going to need to take Introduction to LGBT Studies to get a degree at this university. And why in God's name would anyone have to take a course like that to get a 4-year degree, let's say, in marketing? It's completely ridiculous. The FIU vote passed despite concerns by faculty and the American Association of University Professors, who allege that administrators are overstepping on curriculum matters, which traditionally the professors get to dictate. Only 2 trustees voted against the move. Critics have raised many concerns about Florida's SB 266, which cut off funding for diversity, equity, and inclusion programming, introduced post-tenure review for faculty members, which is even after they get tenure, which is supposed to guarantee them a position to do whatever it is that they want to do. They still have to get reviewed now because of this new law. If what they're doing is inappropriate, if it's political, if it's nonsensical, they could lose their tenure position, they could lose their position altogether. But the provision in this law to reshape the general education curriculum has gone relatively unnoticed, playing out quietly on campuses over the summer and fall in a process that some faculty see as a betrayal of shared governance norms. The state has already dropped principles of sociology from all general education offerings, Last year, state officials declared the discipline inherently liberal. Now more courses are on the chopping block. Starting next fall, students across Florida's 40 public institutions will have many fewer Gen Ed options to choose from, particularly on the subjects of race, gender, sexuality, and diversity. The revisions are driven by a Florida statute established as part of SB 266 that states courses may not distort significant historical events or include a curriculum that teaches identity politics or is based on theories that systemic racism, sexism, oppression, and privilege are inherent in the institutions of the United States and were created to maintain social, political, and economic inequalities. In a statement at last week's FIU Board of Trustees meeting, Faculty Chair Noel Barango argued that the curricular revisions seem to go beyond what is called for by state law, alleging that the process was clandestinely driven by the Florida Board of Governors. And here comes the complaining. Quote, "This appears to be an arbitrary opinion of the Board of Governors staff, unsupported by anything in writing. If the Board of Governors wishes to establish such a regulation, they can do so," he said. However, this proposed regulation would have to be properly vetted, including a public comment period. The absence of such written guidelines makes our job of revising the general education curriculum impossible. Oh, it's not impossible. Just comply with the state law and stop trying to push nonsense on these college students. Just let them learn, get their degree, and go live a great life. Until the Board of Governors establishes such guidelines, he suggested that these forced changes to our core curriculum be delayed. Barango also disputed the notion that any of the canceled courses included distorted historical events or were based upon unproven, speculative, or exploratory content, which would run afoul of state law. Katie Rainwater, a professor in the Global and Sociocultural Studies Department, teaches 2 courses that will be affected by the change: Introduction to Sociology and Sociology of Gender. She worries about what cutting them from general education will mean for students. Well, it will mean they will waste less of their time in your classroom. But here's what she had to say. Quote, "Learning about race, gender, LGBT issues, issues of low-wage workers is relevant and important to our students," she said. "We're a majority-minority university. Most of our students come from working-class families. I think this kind of content helps them make sense of the social world, to understand systems of oppression, and to learn about social movements that have created potential for people from these groups to experience more freedom. I think it's a big loss." Really, you want them to learn about social movements? You want to push them in the direction of maybe joining a violent social group? I don't think it's such a good idea. Maybe they could just get their education, learn to be good at whatever it is that they're passionate about doing, get a great career, enjoy their lives, and move on from there. The university, though, has defended its processes. At a faculty senate meeting last month, Provost Elizabeth Behar argued the university had worked to include the professors in the process of dropping or altering courses, noting that she thought other institutions had not engaged faculty to the same degree. Quote, "We've done our level best to keep the faculty involved," she said. "At FIU, we value and respect faculty governance." FIU's Assistant Vice President for Academic Planning and Accountability wrote in a statement to Inside Higher Ed, "The Office of the Provost and Faculty Senate convened subject matter faculty work groups in fall 2023 to review general education courses to ensure alignment with the standards outlined in the applicable state statutes." Which means they covered themselves. They did their homework. The wokest professors, probably in a big huff, decided, oh, we don't need to be part of this. Let's have a hissy fit. Let's not participate. And now the changes are made, and now it's done. After they identified which courses to drop or change, the president and board of trustees reviewed and approved a list of general education course offerings to be considered for approval by the Florida Board of Governors, she wrote. FIU is not alone in making sweeping changes to its general education curriculum. All Florida public institutions were required to undergo similar revisions. And isn't that great news to hear? But few others have reported on or shared their efforts to comply with SB 266. Of the dozen members of Florida State University system, most did not respond to a request for comment from Inside Higher Ed or did not provide statements on how changes were enacted. They don't want to hear from these people. They know they don't like it at Inside Higher Ed. It's just reality now, and they all have to deal with it. The Florida Board of Governors also did not respond to a request for comment, and a public records request on revisions across all 40 institutions was not fulfilled prior to publication. Besides FIU, only the University of North Florida and Florida A&M University offered a statement on the changes. Quote, UNF began an institutional review of its general education offerings in fall 2022, which was a semester before the legislation was passed. A faculty-led task force was constituted to complete this review, and when the legislation was implemented, members of the task force remained to draft and review options for general education curriculum offerings that adhered to the state's new guidelines. Their spokesperson wrote by email. Courses were removed for various reasons, including if they fit the state's new definitions for the core categories. Florida A&M spokesperson Alonda Thomas shared a link to course changes and cuts approved last month. Quote, we were not adversely affected by the general course changes, she wrote. The process involved collaboration between program faculty, program leaders, and the Division of Academic Affairs to review existing general education courses and ensure they conform to institutional and state requirements. Local and national media have largely ignored the story, except for some coverage on changes to general education courses at Florida Atlantic University and the University of South Florida. But the matter has attracted the attention of the American Association of University Professors, because that group, the American Association of University Professors, realizes that they're about to lose control, especially in red states, of what agenda propaganda nonsense professors are allowed to push. And when they do, those professors are going to go absolutely berserk, and they're also going to be angry at the American Association of University Professors, which, how could they possibly have more power than state government? They can't have more power than state government. Neither can these individual woke professors have more power than state government. They can't decide what reality is, use the state's credibility just because they're supposed to have some academic freedom to teach students what they want to teach them and the way they want to teach it. There have to be some type of standards insisted upon by the state, because when you work for the state, you speak for the state. That's very important. It's a very important responsibility to speak for the state. Indiana has another dispute going on between professors and the state of Indiana, because Indiana is also restricting what these wild professors can say and do on behalf of the state when they're in state-run and state-financed classrooms. Tenured professors there are also getting post-tenure reviews, so the state is essentially checking up on these professors and making sure they're complying with the law. They can't just do whatever it is they want to do on behalf of the state. Not everyone with an educational background is happy about this. Even people that are against the woke agenda and understand it's very destructive and very damaging, this is crossing a line to tell professors what they're allowed to say, what they're allowed to do, to review them post-tenure to make sure they're allowed to continue to keep their tenure. That kind of defeats the whole purpose of tenure. You lose academic freedom. But how can you give academic freedom to people that have no respect for any political ideology other than their own political ideology? There is no such thing as systemic racism. I'm sorry to have to tell people this, but there isn't. If people believe that there is, they can live their life that way. But you can't have a general education class, and several of them like this, forcing these ideas on students, pushing their political agenda on behalf of the state in a state institution. It's absolutely, completely out of line, completely ridiculous, never should have happened, and that's why we need this kind of legislation. Isaac Kamola, director of the AAUP Center for the Defense of Academic Freedom and a political science professor at Trinity College in Connecticut, spoke virtually to the FIU Board of Trustees at last week's meeting. He raised concerns that the faculty senate was bypassed and that revisions were driven by BOG staff. Kamola pointed to SB 266 as an example of a legislative attack on higher education, which he has written about in the past. Kamola cited the sweeping changes implemented across Florida in response to the law, from the closure of DEI offices to content restrictions, which he views as an attack on academic freedom. He's right. It is an attack on academic freedom. It's a defensive attack to push these people back from pushing their nonsense agenda on unwilling students. Well, this seems to be another example of the legislature giving greater authority to political appointees to make decisions over the aspects of the university, including the curriculum, he said. Kevin Grove, a geography professor at FIU, offered a similar view. Grove said that the revisions are part of a long-term effort to dismantle higher education and impose ideological agendas, and to impose state censorship on what can be taught within public higher education systems that's being directed from the highest levels of state government. Yes, those are the people that have the mandate from the constituents on what they want taught in their state-financed universities, or even federally financed with finances passing through the state. Governments get to decide what is done on behalf of the people, not individual professors, not when these professors can't be trusted. Though none of his classes were affected, Grove is concerned about FIU's Global and Sociocultural Studies Department. The cross-disciplinary department integrates anthropology, geography, and sociology. Popular classes, including sociology of gender, enroll more than 100 students, offer multiple sections, and serve as an introduction to the discipline. Without those courses, departmental numbers will fall, and fewer majors will likely enroll without an introductory class. As numbers fall, so will the funding that flows from the state to individual departments. But Grove suspects that is precisely the point of scaling back general education course options. Yes, the state is cutting off the pipeline, the general education classes, that would drive students to worthless degrees. People need to have useful degrees, not political degrees and degrees they can't actually use to try to get a reasonable job. Quote, as they're removed from the core curriculum, you're going to see an artificial enrollment crater that's been manufactured by the Board of Governors. This has long-term implications, not only for the health of departments, but for the very existence of departments such as sociology, anthropology, women and gender studies, African American studies, Grove said. These are all programs whose very existence could be called into question in the future. The United States is in trouble because we have people pushing political agendas in every aspect of life: government, work, education, K through 12 education, wherever you go, whatever you do, entertainment, it's everywhere. There has to be a pushback, and there is a pushback. The more there's a pushback, the more this can go back into its political sphere, which is where it belongs. In people's personal belief system, they can believe whatever it is that they want to believe, but they can't mandate that everyone else goes along with their beliefs, whatever the agenda is. People have a right to not participate in any of this if they don't want to participate in any of this. And to have the state governments pushing these ideas in colleges and universities, that should have never happened. That is way out of control. If you want to do that sort of thing at a private university or a private college, and you're not accepting public funds, go do what you have to do. But in state universities, in state colleges, it's completely inappropriate and it should be cut off. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.